Hello, I'm Dorothy Daniels, your host for the Fostering Parenthood podcast. Season 2 was an absolute joy to create, and it was filled with a treasure trove of insights on communicating with the young people in our care, comprehending their needs, and supporting them on their journey of sexual and reproductive health. Fostering Parenthood Season 2 was an opportunity that I've never had before. I was able to hear other thoughts and opinions like I had never been open to before. And to be able to challenge myself to journey someplace I've never gone before allowed me to grow and to be a better caregiver than I've ever been. I'm thrilled to share a few of these enlightening moments with you. So here are some highlights from Season 2.
About, I'd say, 3 weeks after I gave birth, on my 16th birthday, I had to have an emergency surgery to get rid of my gallbladder because I had jaundice and my skin turned yellow, my eyes turned yellow.
Happy birthday, girl! Dang!
I had a 3-week-old, at home, and it was just not a sweet 16 for me, but it was really traumatic, and I think it was honestly in some ways worse than the birth. And this is like not having a gallbladder. It's typically, it could be if you're overweight, or you're not eating right, but a huge factor too is actually for Indigenous people and people of color. If you come from one of those ethnicities and backgrounds, you're actually at a higher risk for developing gallstones when you're pregnant. And there's ways to mitigate that if your doctor knows your background and history. And, I ate really healthy. I was really thin, even during pregnancy. And there was no reason why I should have, had to lose an organ so young. I think it really goes to say, I've had chronic, health issues since then with digestion and my eating and my weight. And it's really impacted my daily life. And I wish that someone would have been there to advocate for me and do the research and help me find my medical history so that a doctor or healthcare provider could have changed that outcome for my little gallbladder.
How does a child that young find a way to make money in that world? I mean, how do you even get started? I mean, not that I want people to do that, obviously, but how can we prevent it? We have to know how they're getting into it to know how to prevent it.
A lot of us have been exploited or abused by people we know already, like family members or step parents. So that's when we start kind of viewing it as normal and this is kind of the role we play in the world. And like I already said, we're so young, we just don't know that that's not right. And then when we enter the system, unfortunately, in all 3 states that I've been in, I noticed that especially in group homes and shelter settings, where there's so many youth and not enough staff to supervise all of them. Mm-hmm. I just feel the opportunities kind of just show up. It's not necessarily we're looking for them. They just come to the group homes and the shelters, which is weird to say, but I'm no one's really monitoring who's showing up there, or they're not doing it enough. I know some shelters try. And then it's when you're that young and helpless, it's well, this has already happened to me for free and all I got out of it was trauma. So why wouldn't I do it for money?
How do we help them to, or warn them against becoming a victim of CSEC?
Make sure their basic needs are met, both tangible and intangible, mm-hmm. right? So make sure they have the food, clothing, and shelter that they need in mm-hmm. adequate time. And make sure you're paying attention to things that are important, like girls of color. They mm-hmm. have different hair. Mm-hmm. Don't make them have to go to a sex trafficker just to get their hair braided.
Absolutely. 100%.
And look, it's not a fashion thing. It's actually a hair maintenance thing. Even me, you see my hair is braided. I had to pay to get this done. Yeah, and I'm a mixed girl, but and so if I really just wanted to wear my hair curly in our culture, I'd be still seen as pretty and it would be beautiful. There's girls who have hair that's much different than mine, and if they want to embrace their natural hair, that's fine, but it's not always manageable.
For children and youth, they have a whole nother set of considerations too that have to do with oftentimes their phone or the internet being the only place they have autonomy in their life. It may be the only connection that they feel that they have to the life before foster care or the people who are outside of that home. It may be their way of feeling like They can care for, parent, protect siblings that they're not in the same home with, that they can maintain some kind of normal social life through a lot of transitions. It may be the only place that they feel like they really can get the information that they need to get to be able to find out about things like post-secondary education or reproductive health care, or even simple things like how do I get on the bus from home to school. And so they have a whole nother set of sort of attachments to being online. And so whether that's a phone or their tablet or their iPad or whatever, it represents things that oftentimes resource parents have not heard about in their training. So the resource parents were not explaining to the young people what they were concerned about. They were laying down a law. This is what we do in this home. And this is what we're doing to keep you safe, period. And the young person wasn't explaining or wasn't getting the chance to explain what it represented to them and what they felt like was being limited, which was much, much more than a device.
And I love to talk about sex ed like this, but it really is a great practicum and pedagogy for all of life, right? Being able to hold those two things simultaneously. I want the absolute best for you. And I know that talking about safety and barriers is super, super conducive to that. And I want you to be able to make the decisions for yourself and to live your best life in the ways that you define for yourself. So I think that the first step is to offer that to yourself, right? For adults, for parents, for care providers, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to come with compassion for ourselves and say, I had really shitty sex ed. My mom told me the worst things would happen if I ever had sex. And that is a conversation starter with young people right then and there, offering that vulnerability of hey, I'm also a little bit nervous to have this conversation with you. I feel a little bit uncomfortable, naming our limitations and saying, I don't have all of the answers, but I promise that I'm just here to listen, to support, and to offer what I do have is a great place to start. Because I think that young people have this notion of adults of oh, they know everything and they're condescending and they're superior. But we, as the adults, get to break that. We get to disrupt that narrative and say, I don't actually, I'm nervous too. And so just naming it, right? So I have nieces and nephews and I have this conversation with them all the time and I'm terrified. And I'm like, listen, ultimately, what I want is for you to be able to live your life in the ways that you've defined it as best and safest for yourself, right? And it's important for you to know that I come with my own things attached to me. So I've got the internalized learnings of my family, my Catholic upbringing, right? My terrible sex education. And so all of that is going to intersect at some points, and welcoming in the accountability of when it comes up and it doesn't feel good for you, name that to me. Let me know that I'm coming from a place that is scaring you, or that maybe is doing a little bit more harm than good, is so, so critical to get to that point. But again, I firmly believe that we cannot offer it to young people or to anyone that we're in community with if we don't offer it to ourselves first. So really doing the self-reflective and compassionate work of understanding your own journey with sexuality, your own journey to identity, to your pleasure practices, to how you have policed your own body, how society has told you to shrink, or that something's wrong with you because your body doesn't do this or because you don't like that. That self-acceptance, that non-judgmental environment then pours out of us into our young people. But truthfully, if we're not starting here, we don't really have a lot that we can give.